Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
What's up?
Man, what is up? It's a lot that's up, I feel like. I feel like it's just a lot going on in general.
Always a lot going on.
Always.
I know. I feel like in upcoming weeks we'll have some more news to share and things like that.
Yeah, I know. We keep teasing out like little things here and there.
I know, but we working, y'all.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
You working for sure, because I saw you, because you had a couple updates we'll share at some point too.
Oh, yeah.
Look, she has to remember, y'all. This is how much she be doing.
I will say, I know, but what I will say is that I have been celebrating myself.
Yes.
A little bit.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that, but like it goes off of the whole book and all that, so more to come.
Yes.
Yeah, but we've been busy.
Busy, for sure.
Yes.
But excited to be back for another episode.
Yes.
Black Gems Diving Podcast.
We're back. So we're now in April, but we know in March is March Madness, and for me it's like Christmas in March.
Okay.
Because I absolutely love like NCAA basketball, obviously playing it myself.
Yep.
And so I stayed really close to both the men's side and women's side. This year, the women's side was a lot more exciting.
It was more exciting, because I watched the title game last night for the men, and I was like,
yes. So I went to some of the men's games in Kansas City a few weeks ago.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So it was really great to just be in that atmosphere again. But I really was just, tuned into to our women because they were doing it. And this is like the first year that they really were put on a pedestal. I think they were the first year on ABC. Previously, they were on smaller networks. So they broke records in terms of viewership.
I was going to say they were listing all the different events that they had more viewership over. So do you remember some of those? Like
I don't remember the actual events, but it was definitely like, I mean, even when you watch the games, you saw NBA legends at the game. You saw WNBA legends. They had a lot, like you said, a lot more activities surrounding the Final Four and the championship game, and then also too, you had players who we have not seen some of these numbers that they put up.
Well, so numbers in terms of the game itself, right? Like from a scoring standpoint.
From assists, from rebounds. Just pure stat sheet. There's a lot of people like, who's going to be the next Sue Bird and who's going to be the next Diana Taurasi. So,
which is dope to think about, like how far women's basketball has come in this amount of time. Like I remember getting excited around like when the WNBA was initially coming out and how exciting that was. But now just to see the amount of excitement around women's college basketball.
Yes.
I think they were talking about some of the records, and they were breaking records for like WNBA games.
Yes.
And so it's interesting because I think we'll dive into more of the hot topic, but there's a lot of different shifts that have been happening recently. So even from the fact that NCAA players can now get paid.
Yeah, I'm low key jealous.
Look, like
I'm low key jealous because it's like I could have made some money back in the day, y'all.
Right. See, I did I did track and field. I threw for 2 years. I don't know. It was D1. It was something. I wasn't going to be an Olympian.
It was more than something.
It was something. But, I just think about back then and like the demands of you as a student athlete and what that looks like.
Yep.
So D1 is no joke. Oftentimes you were scheduling your classes around your practice time and things like that. And so athletes deserve the opportunity to make some money while they're doing this because they bring so much of the school. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep. So like there's a lot of money, tied up, especially within the Final Four. And to your point, like to make money, like these, I say kids because I now feel old, but these kids are making like millions of dollars.
Millions.
In college off of their name and things like that. So, and that I think attributes to where the game is currently, but then also to seeing some of the controversy that's now coming out because the women's game is now on the pedestal. People are watching it, all this stuff. So if you did not tune into the game on Sunday, I believe it was.
Yes.
So it was LSU in Iowa, and the game ended with a win of 102-85.
With a comeback.
LSU didn't really come. They came back a little bit.
They came back a little bit. Yeah.
But even 102 in the championship game, I think it was like the most points scored ever in a game. And so with that, you had two main players on the stage. You had Caitlin Clark from Iowa, and then you also had Angel Reese from LSU.
Yes.
And so these two players...
Bayou Barbie.
Listen, these two players first of all, put some respect on both of their names, okay? These two players are amazing. They're talented. Again, putting up numbers that we've never seen before. And just the competitiveness that we're seeing with the teams and the players, like I said, it's just unprecedented. So I'm excited to see where women's basketball is going in the future.
Absolutely.
But with that, there was some controversy that came to it.
Get into this hot topic.
So, topic. Let's talk about the hot topic.
Yeah.
So, during this time, we saw Caitlin Clark. You know, she a trash talker, y'all. She just be talking. But it's also to the game, okay?
Yeah.
And so she has certain gestures of putting her hand in front of her face and kind of waving it, which we know is like, you can't see me, or I can't see you, right? I can't see you, like. You have a defender in front of me. I can't see you. I'm still going to score. I'm still going to get my numbers, right? So you have that going on. And then she's been doing it the whole game. You see her waving off opponents, saying like, go ahead, shoot. I know you're going to miss it, right? So she's doing all these little small things. Then you get to the championship game, and Angel Reese gave it right back to her.
Yeah, she did.
Right? So she's doing the same thing. She's putting her hand in her own face, waving her face, saying, like, I don't see you, right?
Pointing to her ring
finger, drawing the ring on her finger at one point in the Final Four, right? But all these different things. And we saw that there were two different narratives being presented. So like I said, Caitlin Clark has been doing this for a very long time. People saying she's competitive. She's the girl. Yeah. I love her feistiness. And
they even had like the teammates give reactions to what she does and how she does it. And she riles the team up. The teammate, of Iowa were really excited because they're like, listen, when she does this gets me so amped and hype. And, she's doing these gestures and whatnot. And she's coming back to the bench and she's hyping us all up.
Yep.
And so they talked about just this is a common thing for her, right?
Yes.
That's a part of her game,
right,
and how she plays.
Right.
And yet, ...
Angel Reese does the same thing.
And
she is called all names in the book, y'all.
All types of names.
She's called an animal. She is called ghetto.
Right.
She is called like filth. All these different things for doing literally the same
thing.
Poor sport. And for those who don't know basketball, Caitlin Clark is a white player, and Angel Reese is a black player, right? So for context, for people who don't watch sports. And so we see, again, in our last episode, we talked about policing of black women and our behaviors, right? And so when a black woman does something that's the same, it's being looked at as, oh, that's awful. She's ghetto. She needs more class.
Right,
it's classless.
Yeah.
All these different things. And Angel Reese, she addressed the media on that.
Sure did.
Right? She addressed the media and just said, this is me being my authentic self, right? One thing I did like about both players is that they were saying, like, this is competitive. This is competitive basketball.
Right.
And I think that, again, we kind of make it a bigger deal in terms of that piece. But at the end of the day, it's basketball, right? And they respect each other, and that's just the nature of the game. Is that trash talk. But again, we see that those two different narratives are coming into play for doing the same exact thing.
And I think it's interesting because we always talk about privilege in many different forms and what that looks like. And you have Caitlin who's saying, listen, this is the name of the game. This is what we do. Honestly, if you can't dish it, if you dish it and you can't receive it back, then I think that says something about you. She's not saying anything about this.
No, she's not.
But she didn't have to because everybody else kind of grouped in and had, and I say everybody else, but we're talking about
the media,
the world, social media, where a lot of this stuff played out. But on one end, when you think about who has a privilege to do things like that, who has a privilege to trash talk, and then even there's other concepts of like, well, men do this all the time, and this is an acceptable form of how they go back and forth with each other, but women, you should be perceived as such. And then in this instance, you have Caitlin who's doing those things, and then Angel who does it back, and now all of a sudden, oh, she's a sore winner, or poor sportsmanship, and why would she do that? She kept taunting her. She, Caitlin only did it for this amount of time. She did it for this amount of time, and so you see the back and forth. And then you have to ask yourself the question: what's the difference? What's the difference?
But this is something that's been, y'all, I've been watching basketball for a very long time. But this is something that has been even going back to, I remember watching Larry Bird back in the day. Larry Bird for the Celtics was the biggest trash talker. Okay, y'all, the biggest trash talker. but yet he was put on this pedestal and he was idolized. I mean, great player, right?
Sure,
not taking that away from him, but if somebody else does it, it was like, oh my gosh, they're awful, and so it's that same narrative, and it's frustrating. But I mean, I think for both of them, both teams, right? It's a new game for women's basketball, and you're gonna start to see it more and more and more.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like even when I was playing basketball, these are the things that you would hear. And for me, I remember playing like all black teams, and I would have coaches say, "Don't be afraid of them. They're gonna be in your face, and they're playing basketball. They're being they quote unquote are being competitive, right? So what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
So but back then that's just was the norm, and no one really talked about it. That's just what you heard. But now it's like, no, we're going to combat that narrative moving forward. So. And then we had...
Well, I think, too, because I know where you're about to go, and I'm like, you see the shoulders gear up a little bit, but I also think about, the notion of, and we talked about this in the policing of women, but also the different intersections. And so in terms of black women, Serena Williams was another one, not even in the basketball realm, obviously, a tennis player who got passionate. She was upset. She would, hit her tennis racket on the ground. A lot of men did that. They didn't say anything about it. But when she did it, all of a sudden it was seen as such aggression or what's wrong with her in that perspective. And so I think a lot of the things that we've seen on social media ask, well, what's the permission around how you can act, or what grace are you given as being someone who's passionate about this? You worked your behind off all year to make it to the title game, right? And so they're saying like you're getting judged based on having too much excitement, having too little. So what is the center of the truth here, and what is it that you're allowed to do as a black woman in this case, right? Like, because we see the differences and they're right in front of your face in this case.
And like Angel said, she's always going to be her authentic self.
Period.
Like she's always going to be her authentic self. And I think as you start to bring more people into this space, like historically you had the UConns of the world and you had the Stanfords and the Tennessees, right? And so there's a shakeup that's happening, right? You're starting to see more black coaches who are hitting this caliber of play. I mean, you have Dawn Staley, you had the Virginia Tech coach, you have these black coaches in these spaces. And one thing that Dawn Staley always going to be her authentic self, which I love too. But even from a coach's perspective, like she is also speaking out about this, because this is something that has been highlighted throughout the whole year, because you have other coaches who are saying like they're too aggressive, they're playing like animals, and Dawn Staley was like, no, we're playing the game of basketball, and that's what it should be. And so one thing that Dawn Staley did previously as well is that when she won title games in the past and got to the Final Four and all that, she took a piece of the net and gave it to every single black coach. And I think just being real, being your authentic self, sharing, the excitement is something that I think we're just going to continue to see. But then we had...
Go on.
You go ahead, all you.
Okay, well, I think one of the other things that was discussed is what generally happens when a game is one of this magnitude. They get an invitation to the White House, right?
Yes.
And so they get to meet the president, they get to meet the first lady, there's pictures taken, they get a tour, they're welcomed in. I don't know, do they get lunch or something?
I don't know.
Probably. They get all these, the croissants and, the finest of the finest, but they're welcomed in after a win.
Yep.
And so there was controversy that ensued right after this because, First Lady Jill Biden had said, and I don't know what press conference this was, but she had mentioned, I'm going to talk to Joe and see if we can invite Iowa too, because they had played a great game. I mean, come on, y'all all made it to, the two of y'all made it to the final game, the championship game. And so she was just saying they should also be allowed to be invited to the White House and recognized for all the work that they had done to get there to that point.
Right.
And then what happened?
What happened? I'm like,
you're like, wait, what happened? What I missed?
I'm like following the story along with you. Like, this is good, y'all.
I think so. What I saw happen after that was Angel Reese tweeted.
Yes. Okay. That
and
part
she
of
said,
story.
"This is a joke.
Yes.
This is a joke.
Yes.
In reference to this, because when in the history of invites, and there's been a lot of different controversy in the past for different sports and everything in terms of who takes the invite, who doesn't. But when in the history of this tradition and inviting the winning team, have we also invited the losing team?
Yes. You don't. It never happens.
When did we give everyone a participation trophy?
Right. Right.
They always talk about millennials and talking about everybody wanting a trophy.
But this is not the time.
This is
not the time
for that.
This is not the time, right? And so she was like, "This is a joke," because it's an insult, it's a smack in the face, right?
Right.
And I think I saw something where she kind of like rescinded that, or Joe actually stepped it. President Biden.
Look, put some respect. Put a little bit of respect on it.
Right. Yeah. So President Biden stepped in, I think, and he did say like, we are formally going to invite LSU, and so they didn't rescind the invite for Iowa. We know there's probably some other implications behind that as well. Sure. But it is, and so it's like, stop giving everyone participation trophy. They won.
Fair and square.
They're the better team,
right?
In all ways, and so it's very interesting.
It is interesting. And I don't know. I think this caliber of game that was played, we're seeing, like, to your point earlier, like, we're seeing a new day as it relates to women's sports, women's basketball, college women's basketball sports, and how the excitement around this and breaking records. I wish we're gonna have to like link this in the show notes.
Yes.
Just on how many events that they had surpassed in terms of viewership and people tuning in. And so now you got these college athletes got all types of deals, and they're signing, and they're getting the monies, making money, lashes, hair, nails, clothes, all these different things.
Even some of them have contracts with banks. So you're starting to see that with commercials with banks. Yeah.
Oh, commercial. Okay.
Yep.
So they're making money, and it's interesting too, because I saw this interview that Angel Reese did, and they were asking her around, like, do you think that because of the caliber that she played, do you think you're going to go straight to the WNBA? Like, you're going to go pro? And she's like, listen, not to be funny, but there's more money to be made in college basketball than there is at the professional level for women, because you're talking about $1 million in terms of contracts and things that she's making. She's making over $1 million now.
Yep.
And then you go into WNBA, and what is the average salary there?
Less than $100,000.
Less than $100,000.
Average salary is like $70,000 right now.
So, I mean, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. But the reality is, she even is aware of what that looks like. She's not going to rush her time through college, because her earning potential is higher now. And then they were asking her specifics around, like, make sure you take in some tax. She's like, oh no, all of that is taken care of. Like, I know how to, navigate. You always keep this to the side, XYZ. But I just think it goes to show that this whole dynamic has shifted and changed, but it's going to continue to. Yes. And I can't wait to see what comes out of it.
It's definitely, there's a lot. Even locally, there's so I know UB is starting to look into how can they help foster this entrepreneurship side and investing side with athletes as well, because you get all this money and now what, right? So there's some things that's brewing over there as well.
Okay.
But yeah, all interesting things.
Yeah.
But it was a good tournament. I'm sad that it's over.
Right.
Because now what I'm gonna do?
What do we got now?
NBA. Well,
NBA,
for me.
Okay, so NBA.
Yeah, I said for me, but
look, NBA.
Right, yeah, NBA.
She's an avid basketball fan, y'all. So I don't take offense to her talking about, well, for me, I know about you, but
I know what you're gonna do. But I'm gonna watch some NBA, and then WNBA starts up in May.
WNBA, which we went to our first game. Well, we went to our first game. I went to my first WNBA. She was like, "No, see, I'm new to this. You true to this. I get it." But I'm excited. I think it's gonna be a different day and age for sports and women's sports.
Yeah.
But yeah, what is now NHL? We went to a hockey game.
We went to a hockey game. My first. So that was my first.
See, now I'm true to that.
That was my first NHL hockey game.
Okay.
And earlier this year was my first hockey game ever when I went to go see Colgate play. I forgot who we played, but we won. That's all I know.
That's all. It was her good. Alma mater. Okay.
Woo, go Raiders.
I've been to multiple Sabres games, so I was, but generally it's just something different to do, right? Like,
it was fun.
Taking in. Sports always brings people together in different ways.
We were close too.
Although we lost poorly, the Buffalo Sabres.
But no, like proximity, we were close. Like of the ice. It was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
All right.
So now we're gonna dive right in.
We're gonna dive right into our conversation today in terms of our topic. And so recently, and I don't know, this conversation has been going on for a while. We're going to talk a little bit about tech. We're going to talk about AI and what that looks like, because there's a lot of implications for AI in the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion space. So AI
is artificial intelligence.
So artificial intelligence, but more specifically around platforms like ChatGPT, I recently was invited through Google's their AI tool.
Oh,
it's
cool.
called Bard.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I heard
B-A-R-D.
that.
So
Okay.
I've been testing that recently. I feel like you got to sign your whole life away when you do. But I'm like, look, they already got all of our info already. Let's be real. We have a conversation. The next thing you know, you get advertising on your phone in 5 minutes. But yeah, so ChatGPT, AI, all these different tools that are coming out that really are going to change the way that people do work, their approach to work. I think about it from a school perspective too.
Yep.
I can only imagine having a tool like that in college or high school.
It's scary.
It's scary for some reasons, but at the same time, there's excitement around what it'll empower you to do with the right, I guess, guardrails around it. So we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of different articles that have come out around AI and using artificial intelligence. And so we've seen a lot of different things happen. Voice recognition, self-driving cars. We're in the space where, like the Jetsons day and age. I feel like, you remember growing up watching
I even think
the Jetsons?
about like even having, we both have like the Apple Watch. And it was like back in the day to go talking to the watch to call people.
We're being tracked for so many different ways. That's a whole nother conversation. We got to get somebody in cybersecurity come on and talk about that. But they're talking about AI and how it's here to stay, right? So there's an article that came out from Fast Company, and it says, is AI bad for diversity? And so as AI is coming out, it can impact diversity, equity, and inclusion interventions. And there's a lot of conversations around, will it create a fair opportunity, in terms of its usage? People are getting all types of things out of AI. We talked to Jamil earlier before we started about how someone needed to write a 30-page paper, and they wrote in the ChatGPT function, write a 30-page paper and hit on these different points. And guess what?
It just spit it out within seconds.
It spits out a 30-page paper with topics, headings, resources and references and things like that. So we know that this is going to change.
Yes.
This is going to change the world, y'all.
It's changing.
It currently is, and it's going to continue to do that. So one of the risks that they're talking about as it relates to the DEI space is that a lot of folks might see this as an unbiased approach, right? So you're using this function. It's a computer that's generating it. It can scan and hopefully take bias out. But the reality is, who is building the AI?
Right.
So AI and resources and tools like this are only as good as the people who are inputting, and building these systems. And so there was a conversation around challenging issues in AI and the DEI space, and it becomes an issue around who's programming it. So the World Economic Forum had shown that about 78% of global professionals with AI skills are male, while a study by the AI Now Institute of New York University showed that over 80% of all AI professors are men. And so women make up only 15% of AI researchers working at Facebook and 10% of AI researchers working at Google. Also, only 2.5% of Google's entire workforce, and this is their entire workforce, and 4% of Facebook's and Microsoft's workforce are Black, right? So these figures need to change, and quickly. They also talk about, trying to prevent this bias, but it's whoever's inputting this into the system itself, it's going to pick that up as what is considered normal and what is considered like the foundation and basis of it. Right.
And it's really interesting because even when we're looking at like jobs that are getting ready to be eliminated and replaced by AI, right? So we all follow, both of us, we follow Earn Your Leisure, which you absolutely love. And they talked about even the jobs that are going to be replaced, right? So customer service reps, computer coders, things like that, cashiers, medical assistants, and what jobs are here to stay. And so what can you do in terms of, first of all, building your skill set, right, to be a part of the people that are coding these systems, right? And so we talk about this all the time in the tech world of programs and getting people into these different programs and literally closing the gap for accessibility, right, to get into these programs. We're talking about these numbers need to change quickly, but what can we do at the root to help change these numbers, right? And so we have these conversations about the accessibility of getting into that world and that space. That's the first thing. But secondly, also too, again, who are you hiring, right? And we know like there's a lot of conversations around hiring and diversifying, but really being intentional about who you're hiring and what you're hiring them for. And that's going to be, again, the future of the workforce when it comes to these AI.
And so people are even using AI for hiring practices, right? And so from a procedural standpoint, using AI to vet resumes that come in, to maybe highlight resumes that they want to bring in for interviews. So it's removing a barrier of someone else's job, to be honest, in order to kind of screen through some of this. And so when you think about hiring, we often talk about it even from a consulting practice. How do you hire with lived experience in mind or diversity in mind? So people do things like remove names, they remove address data, so you don't know where this person's coming from. But what they're saying is in AI, because there's a lack of diversity that's inputting into the system, a lot of those biases that we would try to, teach around or like give people input on are just going to be influenced in the AI itself.
Right. And so there's another article that talked about, in 2018, Amazon was forced to scrap its secret AI recruiting tool after the tech giant realized it was biased against women. And in 2019, a study conducted by Harvard Business Review concluded that the AI-enabled recruiting algorithms introduced anti-Black bias into the process. And so AI bias is caused often unconsciously, which we talked about, right? By people who design, as we talked about. And what I find interesting in this article says, if AI is trained on biased data, it will in turn make biased decisions. Right. And so again, we have to be intentional of who is building AI. And I will say too, right, and just candid conversations that I've had with some people, specifically in the Black community, it's like, I'm not going to give not my information, but I'm not going to help build this, or I'm not going to put my input, or they're going to take this and going to take that. And it's like, well, they need that. Like, I remember, what was the one tool that everyone was doing? Lensa, what was it called? Where you had to put your face, like you take the picture, Lensa, right?
Something like that, yeah.
And so even I was skeptical, like, I'm not putting my face into this program,
no.
And people using my face to build up their algorithms. But on the other side of it is like, well, maybe they do need it. Like, think about all the time. I read an article a while ago, even when it came to facial recognition, right? With phones and everything like that. Like, how sometimes they couldn't, like, even years ago, they couldn't identify certain people because their face wasn't in the database, like their features, right? And so it's just really interesting when you look at it from that lens as well. Like, to your point, they already have our information, so should I subscribe to this? Should I not?
I don't know about that. I don't know about that piece. I'm not completely sold on that yet. But I will say that there's a lot of different ways that the good is coming out in this too, right? The potential for what this could be used for, and the good side of some of the DEI efforts. One of them that came up is how, improving how we measure performance. And that's a really interesting one, because I think on the podcast in the past, we've talked about how bias is perceived in all these different levels and layers of, like hiring, right? Or performance evaluations. And so I know from experience in overseeing HR, we would actually scan. So people would submit all of their performance evaluations, and we would assign that to someone on the HR team to then look through all of them to see if there was any bias in terms of what that looked like. So, you're giving similar comments, but this person gets a 4 out of 5 and this person gets a 3 out of 5. Why is that the case, right? Like, and asking and going back to question that. So one of the things that came out that could be used for good in terms of the AI is an opportunity to use AI to boost meritocracy, right? So since most so-called performance metrics, such as annual performance ratings, job interview ratings, and even 360-degree feedback ratings, are contaminated with things like politics, nepotism, and privilege, which are all common and pervasive biases, algorithms could be trained to quantify the value that workers actually add to their teams, units, and organizations, and it would require identifying patterns, connecting what employees and leaders do, and salient organizational outcomes, which would then reduce the current gap between an employee's success, their career success, and their actual performance or productivity. So because algorithms can be trained to focus on what matters, things like sales, revenues, profits, productivity, innovation, engagement, and turnover, while ignoring things that shouldn't matter, gender, race, age, attractiveness. We know there's a pretty bias there as well. There's now a greater opportunity to make performance management more data-driven through the use of AI. So I don't know. There's parts of me that's like, oh, that's great. But there's also parts of me like, when you think about equity, and a basis of equity, like giving people resources and tools for what they need it for, like, does it take into account some of that stuff? Does matter, right? Like, in terms of someone's starting point. So as much as I'm like, oh, this is great, you always think about the flip side of what that could potentially do down the line then, right?
Taking away that human element, right, of what it's almost like retraining So you're taking all this time to train a human,
right?
And now again to retrain a system, which though at the end of the day, right? They talk about AI systems like we know it's only obviously as smart as the information that you put into it, but it keeps evolving on a daily basis, right? So it could narrow those efficiency gaps that we see of training, training people by putting people into the place of obviously building the system. So,
but I think that is if everything is equal, then this makes sense. But think about people who might need a reasonable accommodation at work because they might have some type of disability or learning impairment of the sort. Like, would it then take that into consideration? Because you might need something different than somebody else, and so we're going to measure you against all these same metrics. But I don't know. That's the space that I'm like, okay.
Right. I think probably preliminarily it may have like those gaps, but again, like down the line, it may account for things like that, right?
We'll see.
So I don't know. I think of just how like computers are just.
A part of me wants to get into that space, to use that for something. Like, not to program.
Yeah, I was like, that's a whoo. I was like,
but like to use that programming in DEI efforts and like trying to make sure that it accounts for things like that. That would be cool.
Right. Cool. They also talk about how AI is used to identify disengaged employees. So as we talked about as well, like, workers who feel marginalized or disconnected, not engaged. Companies can use AI to identify departments or roles with a high risk of attrition, workers who are dissatisfied or not engaged, and even people who feel isolated because they're working remotely.
Interesting.
So they said generally working remotely has been a bigger impact on diverse employees because there are higher degrees of isolation. Less connection can be more harmful in most cases. And so these tools can help managers understand why these employees are at more risk than others. So I think that's really interesting as well, using different cloud analytics and tools to really look at correlation and causation.
I think some other cool functions that I've seen this work for. So we utilize Canva for like making marketing materials and things like that on the business side. And it's been interesting because now Canva has introduced an AI tool well, which you can like magic eraser. You can get rid of things in a picture. Say you take a picture and you want to get rid of the plant behind us. You can then just shade it and the plant is removed, right? It also helps you to build decks, so PowerPoint decks. So you can put in their AI tool, hey, Canva, build me a presentation on DEI 101 and include these certain points. And they will actually build out the slides. They'll put pictures in there. So a part of me is like, this is cool because this is a tool that you can utilize to help. But at the same time, the human element, and I don't know, some of that, like taking that connection out of it is just going to be, it's different.
It's different. But that's what our parents would say too. Like, oh my gosh, these computers, you're taking away the one-on-one interaction.
Calculators.
We used to have a slide rule back in the day, right? So that's all I just think of my mom. Shout out to my dude. But, I think about that as well. Technology is changing, right? So there's a lot of like predictive modeling that's happening. And so the more you put into it, the more it can kick back what you need. And so it needs an end user. It needs someone also putting in the information as well. So.
But to your point, does that just make us rely more on technology and not on the creative senses of ourselves? So creativity can be diminished because now we're reliant on these computers to do that,
Like even this is something completely like I thought about that. I watched CBS News and NPR all the time. And one of the things that they were talking about was there's a McDonald's, I want to say it's out west somewhere. I want to say it's Denver, but don't quote me. But there's a McDonald's that's completely
all AI.
AI. Like there's no people. You know, and it's so I find that to be really interesting. And a guy came on and he was being interviewed. He was like, I miss a smile.
Sure.
He was like, I miss just sitting down, a smile, getting a cup of coffee, talking to my friends, like, those type of things. So taking that element out of it as well is like really interesting. But it is just a lot of times where I'll even go, I'll go to businesses and I'm met with computers or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, I'm taking it back a little bit.
The warm handshake, the smile. I think you also started to get into another element of the economics of it, right? So think about, and automation has always been something that I know more manufacturers and manufacturing, they're using automation for many different processes, but it is changing the way that some of these entry level or service level jobs are going to be as well, right? Like, so customer service is one of those spaces and fields that is concerning, right? Like everything's automated now. And so those are lots of jobs. And now who generally needs those type of jobs are people who might have, you know, they're coming from a marginalized background in some sort. So I think the long-term impact of this is going to be interesting. But to your point, we got to get people ready now to be tech adjacent and have some of those skills so that they're not, I mean, so that they're still relevant down the line, right? So what that looks like in the future. More to come.
It's gonna be interesting.
It is.
It's kind of scary. Like I feel like I'm gonna be living in an iRobot world.
Listen,
you remember Will Smith, that movie?
Yes.
Like I went to a conference recently and they had the robots with that simulates a dog.
Oh, those are scary to me. I can't.
And I jumped really quickly, and my coworkers and I, we were laughing because they were like, "Oh, they probably got you on camera," because the whole thing is they're monitoring the interaction between this robot and humans for the next 5 years to see if they can be in society with humans. And I'm like, I feel like I'm in iRobot a little bit.
And you know how this ends all the time. Look, you know how this ends all the time. And I'm into dystopian. I don't know why this genre, which is interesting too, because something came out recently on Instagram linking dystopian, the genre to actual minoritized communities that have gone through something, and now they just co-opted that story and made it into fiction. So it's based in something.
Right.
But I watch these things, and it's because it's so closely related to the real world. So when we talked about Handmaid's Tale, and then the rollback of Roe versus Wade, okay, there's dynamics like that we're seeing kind of play out right in front of us. But this AI dynamic, iRobot, come on now. Y'all know the robots start talking to each other and they start coming together and talking about how they're going to take over the world. So we'll enjoy AI for now.
I'm excited though. I know. I'm excited
we'll enjoy it for now.
I'm excited, but there's going to be a lot of, like you said, groundwork that needs to happen for marginalized communities specifically. But there are a lot of, great programs out there. There are great people who are working on filling those gaps, and right here in Buffalo and Western New York. So
shout out Tech Buffalo.
I was going to say, shout out Tech Buffalo. Doing amazing stuff over there as well. More to come on that. So gem of the day, the week, the month. Who child? Gem. I was gonna say this, y'all. I can't stop smiling. I don't know why.
Yeah, I like that.
I know why. I know why. But in terms of just, taking a step back and really just reflecting, we've been talking about a lot, manifesting. We have a friend chat group called Strategic Planning, because
shout out to the Strategic Planning group.
What up? So shout out to them. And it's really been a lot of things that we've talked about for the past year or two, we're seeing in motion. And the reason why I'm smiling is because I look at you, I look at all my other friends, I'm like, man, y'all, we really doing it.
We doing it.
And there's a lot of times people only see the end result on social media or whatever. And we talk about that all the time. But I love seeing my friends win in many ways. And so it's just, for me, it puts a smile on my face. I love it, celebrating us. Yeah. And it just feels like a new time. We've been in the pandemic. Now we're out of the pandemic.
Are we? Well, something like
we're
that.
We're in the ending, whatever. Like but we're not, so it's just really great to see kind of the sun and I don't know. For me, I just can't stop smiling. And so for me, my I don't know, gem of the day is to just really take a step back and reflect, and not just celebrate yourself, but celebrate your friend circle. It's just, it's great just to have some dope friends that will elevate you and
absolutely
promote you and
hold you accountable.
So I don't know. That's just my.
I like that.
Gem.
I like that. Yeah. I think I'm gonna. I always say if you go first, I'm like, okay, what you saying? Okay. But I think this is a season of transition, right? And we've talked a lot about this, I think, even in the past couple of podcasts, but we talked about doing it scared, even though you might have fear around making some decisions. I know for me this year, my only resolution was to make decisions and be concrete in them and go forward with what it is that you desire, right? And so I also would say, give yourself, the gem of the day for me, like give yourself space and time to connect with self, right? Like to really engage with yourself and see what it is that you want to be doing.
Yes.
Because sometimes you sit back and you realize you're living life for many other people, you know, trying to fulfill the different, you know, voices that are always kind of coming at you and telling you how you should do things or what you should do. But give yourself that space to really sit back and, you know, survey yourself. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you truly want to do? How do you want to live these next 3 to 5 years? You know, we talk about our chat group called strategic planning, but it really is strategy around what you want to do and how you want to do it. Because oftentimes you'll look up and 5-10 years will go by and you'll realize, man, I don't know if I really accomplished, or not even on the accomplished side, but I don't know if I created the type of life that I wanted for myself. And so to take a step back sometimes and look at what you've done in the past and what you want to do in the future, like it's never too late to readjust, you know, reset the sails, like, you know, organize your life in a way that would really make yourself happy and proud. You know, and what's centered in yourself.
Right. And what's for you is for you.
Absolutely.
Like that was the biggest lesson for me. It's like, you know, we have our chat group and I love it, but what's for one person may not be for the other. And so you have to make adjustments and see what works for you so you can ultimately win. And it's constant adjustments, right? Constantly. So that's, you know.
So more to come on that too. We always keep saying more to come, more to come. You just got to keep listening. That's all.
I know. We have y'all keep coming back.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Well, that's another episode.
All right. Bye, Kua.
Peace.